I've been touring the country with this book for the last 3 weeks, and completely not knowing that I just wrote this book. I'll explain in a second how I wrote this book totally accidentally. But what I've been hearing is that somehow I think I've tapped into something that the emotional and psychological side of a patient life. I didn't set out to do that. It wasn't like I'm going to sit down and write this book about that. What actually happened is that I had been writing fiction. Those books aren't published, but if anyone would like to publish those first 2 novels, I'm open to that too. But I had been writing fiction for a long time. I had written a lot of short stories and had stuff published, and I was like waiting for my career to launch. But I also had 3 kids, a med school husband, he's now a physician. So we'd been through all that. We'd moved 100 million times. And so I hadn't quite launched my career, but about 3 or 4 years ago, I did get an agent for my first book. Of course, I thought, that's it, I'm going to Hollywood, but that book was on submission and didn't sell right away. And in fact, was getting kind of to the end of when you're submitting. They tell you, write another book, so I did. I wrote another book, and this book was about a woman who finds a lump in her breast, thinks she might have breast cancer, and wonders if she's lived a meaningful life. So I thought, this is the book that'll launch my career. And what happened is that I finished that January 2006, went in for my mammogram a week or 2 later, and was myself diagnosed with breast cancer. So that was like a very odd and strange moment, thinking how did this happen? And then in the meantime, my 25-year-old agent, who I didn't want to tell her I had been diagnosed with breast cancer, thinking that doesn't sound very, glamorous. So I didn't tell her, but I'd sent her the manuscript, and while I was waiting for my own results about my diagnosis, I get an email from her that says, I don't really like that breast cancer book. I'm not really sure I care whether that woman has breast cancer or not, because I had left the ending ambiguous, thinking that was good. So so life was kind of strange, and that was like the least of my worries at that point. My biggest thing was that even though I had the lumpectomy and I had like the best of the worst diagnosis I had, it was non-invasive, they had gotten it early, it seemed like everything was fine. I didn't bounce back the way I thought I would. I was just in this kind of very stunned, paralyzed, and panicked state, and I was doing nothing but staring out the window and then Googling, like obsessively Googling health sites, which people do now all the time. And just like the more information I learned, the more it would contradict other information. And I was like learning about, then I learned about toxins in like all my health, like all my beauty stuff I was using. So I decided I was going to start an organic facial cream company, and I got all these books, and I was like mixing up batches of facial cream. I mean, honestly, I was like really losing it. So my husband one day came home and he like pressed this journal in my hand and he goes, you need to write this. And I was like, write this? Like, who would ever want to read this? But I did. And the first I did eventually just started writing, and the first line was, I'm sitting topless in the oncologist's office on Valentine's Day. Can I swear in here? Is that okay? Cancer is a bitch. And from there, I just went off. My hand shook, I cried, I wept, and just poured everything out. But ironically, thinking that the reason I'm writing it here is because I don't want to burden anyone with these crazy thoughts and feelings, and now you can buy them, which I hope you all will. But who knew that people would want to read that? But I started writing for Literary Mama. They won columnists. I pitched the idea to be Bare-Breasted Mama, and they loved it. And immediately I got a ton of email from both people who'd had cancer, but people who loved people who had been through cancer, and just women and men who I was talking a lot about kind of midlife concerns, which is what, when you face your mortality, really kind of crystallized in my mind all the choices that I had or hadn't made. So instead of talking more right now about what I think maybe is in the book, I'm thinking, since I'm not a psychologist or MD or anything, I'm a writer, I actually will read my words, and I'm hoping that'll spark discussion, and then we can kind of take this conversation wherever you want it to go. I'm very open to that. So I'm going to read from, this is the 3rd chapter, and it was after I had my core biopsy and I was waiting for my results, which as a wife of a physician, the results didn't come on the phone, they came in the door. It was a little different because he knew the pathologist. Anyway, just so some people don't understand why it happens that way. Okay, but you probably do. It's called I'm It. I was watching Oprah, waiting for the results from my core biopsy and the final from frumpy to fabulous unveiling of the housewife from Kalamazoo after the commercial break, when cancer barged into my family room saying, "Sorry, sorry, 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 you have ductal carcinoma in situ." "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?" I blabbered, as if that string of words said emphatically enough would overpower the other words. But words were not words. Words were fish, and the air a murky cesspool spewing lies, damn lies. Like sorry? Cancer didn't mean sorry. It meant fuck you and your comfort, your complacency, your petty concerns, your smug belief that you deserve to be lucky, to live unscathed. Fuck you and your naive delusion that you had any control over the fate of your body. "It's intermediate grade and we don't know how much is in there," Mike, that's my husband, said in a voice too high, too loud, too soft, too strained, too stricken, too, "I'm going to be really nice to you now because I'm afraid you're going to die." How could I yearn for his impatient tone? "The sooner we get it out, the better," he said, rubbing his hands on his pants so vigorously I thought he could rub it away. I shook my head. "Alex has a basketball tournament, and Maddie starts driver's ed tomorrow, and Anna has a term paper due, and we're out of milk. And I pointed to the TV, a commercial for Botox, the words, "It's your turn now," illuminating the screen. "And Oprah is over, and now I've missed the housewife from Kalamazoo," I said, and burst into tears. But cancer didn't hear me, didn't see me cry. It was busy moving in, crushing my sternum, throttling my throat, sucker punching my gut, bullying me into submission. How had I not appreciated my health all those years I didn't have a diagnosis, following me everywhere like an annoying sibling, mimicking my every move, mirroring the parts of me that make me feel awkward, ashamed. My diagnosis a brat, demanding center stage, forcing me to fill my calendar with appointments where I'm weighed and blood pressured and poked and probed, felt up and down and warned about my risk. I want to be brave. I want to be big. I want to be gracious and cool. I want to be the Audrey Hepburn of cancer. I want to be like that girl who went to my high school, Heather Arnold, tall and lithe and wide-eyed. She had leukemia, and when her long, diaphanous, white blonde hair fell out, she tied the most gorgeous silk scarves around her delicate head, sloped bell-bottom pants off her jutting hips, wrapped her bony wrist in loose sheaves of silver bangles. She wore it well. She made cancer look sexy, as if the very fact that she wouldn't be here forever made her mysterious and irresistible, more valuable than the rest of us. But I'm not like Heather. For one thing, I'm not tall or bony, and cancer doesn't feel sexy on me. It feels ugly, cankerous, mean, and old. It reminds me I'll never be 20 again. The time has moved faster and less kindly than I expected, and I'm not wearing it well. I can't figure out how to hold my face anymore, what to do with these weary eyes afraid to stare back at me, this mouth that doesn't know how to smile anymore when smiling feels so foreign, so strange. How did I ever smile when all I can think is cancer, 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 cancer? As I sit in the examining table in the internist's office for my pre-op physical, I think about Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking, how it was praised for its lack of self-pity as I silently chant, "Poor me, poor me, poor me." It takes all of my energy to contain my tears, but I don't know my internist very well, have seen her twice in 5 years. I'm almost never sick, no colds, no flus, no aches or pains. I run with my daughter, shoot hoops with my son, practice yoga, eat organic food. I am an armchair nutritionist, a person others consult for health and anti-aging tips, a lifelong subscriber to prevention. I feel that me slipping away as I wonder how I could suffer a condition more serious than my chain-smoking, nitrate-loving, fruit-phobic, non-exercising mother-in-law ever experienced. Fuck you, Joan Didion. It wasn't you who keeled over before dinner. Why me? Why me? Why me? I looked around my son's kindergarten class of 24, the internist says, slicing into my less than stoic thoughts, pressing the cool stethoscope on my back, motioning for me to take a deep breath. And I thought, 3 of these mothers. Her sentence trails. She looks at me as if I'm supposed to finish her thought. 3, I say? 1 in 8. She shakes her head and works her finger up my neck to feel for lymph nodes. Any of your friends? No, I say, and as she runs her fingers up and down my throat, oddly, I think about when I studied Emerson in graduate school. This is Emerson. I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. I am glad to the brink of fear. That it reminded me of how I felt when I was a child and played Duck, Duck, Goose, and I was tagged. Before I dress, she presses a prescription for Valium into my hand, her eyes more apprehensive than I want them to be. I want her to take it all back, say it isn't true, say we were wrong, you were fine, no need for surgery, go home, eat a lot of red dye number 2, and fritter away the rest of your ridiculously long life. Instead, she says, don't worry. Patting my wrist, tripping over the second syllable in worry, making me worried that she can't even say the word, and I feel her pity metamorphosize me. I'm it, I'm Goose, I'm giddy, I'm trapped, I'm trembling. After I fill my prescription, the whole way home, I hum the Rolling Stones song. This is the sing-along. Okay, they made me take the lyrics out. So this is that song, Mother's Little Helper. Anyone here know it, or are you all too young for this? Okay, I'll start it out for us. Okay, it starts, oh God, does anyone know it? What a drag it is getting old. Okay, and then it goes, okay, but the things are different today. I hear every mother say, mother needs something today to calm her down. And then it's, she goes running for the shelter of her mother's little helper and rattling the pill bottle against my thigh like a tambourine. That's the end of that chapter. Would you like another chapter, or should we just talk? I can do another one that kind of, anyone? Yes? Another one, okay. Then we can talk about the stuff that this might bring up, I hope. Okay, this is a few chapters later. I should tell you, the Mother's Little Helper thing. So right after my surgery, but before this chapter, after this chapter I'm going to read, it was about 2 weeks after my surgery. There was the annual Christmas party. Because my husband's a physician, we go to the party even though I didn't really want to go to the party. And I realized there are 10 people in that room who have seen me, crying before I'm set up for surgery, topless, at my absolute worst state. So I'm standing there, I'm still not feeling 100% anyway. I'm feeling I look a little strange, I'm still a little swollen. I was not ready to go to the party, but I did it as a nice wife. I go to the party and I just start getting this, and I drank a couple, 1.5 glasses of wine. I hadn't had anything to drink at all since surgery. And then my husband and I have a big argument on the way home. How could you make me go to that party? We have one of those kind of arguments. And I get home and I go upstairs to draw myself a tub, and I take a Mother's Little Helper. And as all of you know, that was not a good idea. The hot tub, the 1 glass of wine, the Mother's Little Helper. But you have to read the book to see what happens. I was okay. So this is now, but this is before, this is after, after the core, then I had to have the lumpectomy. And this is when I'm waking up from my surgery, from the lumpectomy, and it's called Baby Doll. I wake to the sound of my raspy voiced neighbor flirting with the post-op nurse. Make mine a double, darling. A double what, the nurse says, and giggles and flips her stiff blonde bangs out of her eyes, and dust particles rise and fall, rippling through my groggy drift. Her bangs bouncing off her forehead rhythmically, flip, flip, flip. She's still flipping towards him when she pokes her head into my cubicle and says, "You plan on joining us?" I should say something witty, something wise, something memorable, something that will cement me here in this life forever, but all I can think is I'll never be able to compete with him. For one thing, he's a man and she's a woman, and now I've lost that train of thought. And another thing, I'm weak, awake from the anesthesia, but barely, in and out and out and out. Come back, I tell myself, come back. This world is good, sprinkled with teeny tiny dust particles that flounce and float and waltz through the air, landing on my knuckle, the warm, sticky tug of 4-year-old Anna and 3-year-old Maddie dragging me down the basement stairs, saying, "Baby doll, Mommy, play baby doll." And me following in their determined footsteps, down, down, down the creaky stairs to the cinder block playroom that I'd set up with magical wands and pixie dust, a pretend corner that morphed from diner to castle to emergency room to pirate ship, where I was an astronaut and Anna was Shira and Maddie a king and all of us were chased by a nearsighted rhinoceros. A playroom where I could mother them and myself, where I could be the kind of mother who not only played with her children, but who wanted to play with her children. And I did, but Baby Doll snuck up on me. Baby Doll threw me. I hated Baby Doll, cringed at the mere mention of Baby Doll because Baby Doll meant that I had to be Mary Poppins while they marched for women's rights, went to grad school, out to lunch, to very important meetings, and while I encouraged and admired their choices, I was left holding the baby, burping and feeding and changing diapers and cleaning and singing the baby to sleep while they did all the things I wasn't doing, even though I was only in my early 30s and all my friends were still single and traveling and building careers, amassing lovers and experiences, while Mike worked 120 hours a week. And we had no money for babysitters, no family nearby to help, and day after day, hour after hour, the boundaries between the girls' needs and mine blurring in that airless basement playroom, playing Baby Doll, because I didn't know how to say no. Felt as if saying no to them was like saying no to me. But I was only going through the motions, thinking about other things in my head, how I'd ended up a full-time mother when I'd meant to work, how powerless I felt not working, how lonely marriage could be, how terrified I was of shouldering the monumental responsibility of not irrevocably screwing them up. I'd imagine them on a therapist's couch at 40 saying, "My mother was bored with Baby Doll." And when Anna returned from her very important meeting, I was still holding the baby, but so absent-mindedly that she was flipped upside down, her eyes lolling back in her head, and Anna would climb on my lap, and I wanted her to see how bad I was at Baby Doll and give me a break. But no, instead she would cup my face in her sturdy hands and say, "More, Mommy, more." And that was the other thing about Baby Doll. There was always more, and I was never enough. There wasn't enough of me, wasn't enough for me. Baby Doll and too many hours in the playroom and my mind turning to mush and me yearning to flirt and eat exotic mushrooms and go to Bora Bora and finish my graduate degree, finish one complete thought, write something, anything other than grocery lists, and go to the bathroom without someone trailing behind me saying, "Play, Baby Doll, Mommy." And now I wonder, did I play enough Baby Doll? Too much Baby Doll? Should I have spent more time on my career, gone to China with that grad school professor when I had a chance, been more of a force in my own life? How do you know when you're immersed in endless days melding into one another that time isn't endless? In fact, it's so fleeting that everything you did or didn't do takes on monstrously exaggerated, rhinocerotic proportions when you're in a hospital recovery bed making tabulations. 45 and a half years times 365 minus 347 non-stop days of Baby Doll, and countless hours of nursing and weaning and tantrums and cuddling and whining and Eskimo kisses and boo-boos and band-aids and shoelace tying lessons and middle school traumas and orthodontia and soccer and little league and basketball and first love heartaches and college applications and 2 unsold novels and a handful of publications and an abandoned graduate degree and 19 and a half years of a great big messy work in progress marriage on which the jury is still out and an old bureau at the top of the stairs crammed with mismatched socks. Decided to join us, huh? I hear the nurse say. "Sex on the beach," raspy voice shouts. "That's the name of the drink I was thinking of. I'll take a double one of those." Giggling, giggling, join them. Do I want to? I do. But the peace between the breaths lures me. Hear rubber shoes clutch and unclutch linoleum, stiff cartwheels whine, sense a thrumming so deep inside it feels as if someone is playing my nerve endings like a classical guitar. It aches, but it feels. I want to feel. I want to come back. I rub my eyes, see blurry pods of artificial light, a seafoam blanket shrouding me, the tip of my nose. I run my tongue on the roof of my mouth. It's dry, I'm thirsty, part my lips, say, "I've made sex on the beach." Laughter, loud and raucous and real. "The drink, I mean, I was a bartender once." That's what they all say, my neighbor snorts. And the nurse bats her eyes, flips her bangs, flip, flip, flip. And I realize I'm back. I've made it through the surgery, made my nurse and my neighbor laugh. But I also realize I can't change Baby Doll. The girls are grown, and I have to make peace with what I did, what I didn't do. And I need more time to launch my children and myself, to sort through and repair my shortcomings as a mother and a woman and a wife. I'm not ready to make the final tabulation, not ready to leave the party. I want to know what happens next, how my children turn out, whether I make something more of myself and whether that matters, whether Mike and I figure out how to be married. I want to know if my nurse and my neighbor hook up. I want to feel my breath tickle the tiny hairs that line my nose, to witness one spectacularly graceful dust oracle soaring through the air on the power of my exhalation. So that's my 2 chapters. And thank you. Thank you. So I'm thinking that maybe this raised some issues or questions we could talk about. I really, you can ask me anything. I'm open to talking about whatever. Yes?
Well, I'll get it started.
Okay, thanks.
So you're a literary mama. So if you could take an adjective that describes you before and you after, what would those adjectives be?
Just off the top, we're doing a quickie thing. I think, well, no, this might be more of a verb, but we'll go with it, okay. Hesitating before, hesitant, and urgent. I guess that would be one. I could do this, I could do 50 of these, but just a whole different sense of, the whole thing sparked this. I just realized this is life. Right now, this is life. It's not, what I didn't do before, and it's not after the holidays, but it's now, which was actually, in a strange way, a kind of beautiful thing to learn, but not, I wouldn't, you don't want to learn it the way I had to learn it. But, so I stopped hesitating, went from why to why not, and I live more urgently now. It's exhausting, but it's fun.
You're coming from a background of being interested in natural healing, natural foods. Did you have a problem accepting the course of care?
A little bit.
For you?
Yeah, I'm on tamoxifen, and I had a real block with that for a long time, but I think that I realized, my thing is that not only did I have that one diagnosis, I've had I've had 2 core biopsies, and then I ended up having 5 kind of suspicious areas. So I've had what they call a total of 7 biopsies, which that and that diagnosis and the fact that it all started at a fairly young age, 41 was my first questionable time, my risk factor is pretty high, and so I guess I came to the realization that it was actually a good thing to halve that risk. I mean, it was maybe 28% went down to 14. I was yeah, I think I'll go for that. And also, but I do worry about that in particular, that messing with the hormones. I was never even a person to take much, I wasn't a person who took any kind of medicine. I was so natural. But I guess I kind of learned that in my mind, it's I do everything I can to counter. I hated when they told me, you're going to gain 15 pounds on tamoxifen and blah, 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 and all this stuff. I was no, I'm not. So I started running more, and I cleaned up my diet even more. I lost 7 pounds, But so I guess in my mind, you're right. I do have a little problem, but then I'm always thinking, but I'll do it my way, and then I'll counter it with this stuff that I'm learning. And I do, it does kind of bother me that, there's a chapter in there, but I went to Mayo Clinic with a whole list of stuff I had learned about just pesticides and, I don't know, parabens. That was what I was talking about. They were in a lot of stuff. And I went to, and Mayo's wonderful. I'm not criticizing them, but I went to an MD nutritionist there, and I was what do you think about all this stuff? And basically, they didn't have a big opinion about it. So I kind of feel I have to supplement with my own stuff. Yes?
So did you change to using a lot more all-natural stuff, and the facial cleanser, did you start using making your own?
I did. Well, I stopped making them was a lot of work because you have to keep making them fresh. So it was making them every 3rd day and then refrigerate it. It was that would have been a full-time job, and I really thought I should get back to the writing, and I did. But I buy all natural stuff, and I'm really careful. I was really fanatic, I think, for the first year, and I've loosened up a little bit because you can't live in the world. I've been traveling. You're not always in a place where you're going to get organic food, and you're not always in a place where you maybe have to use that bar of soap that's, you know, like, so I've kind of come to the point where it's like, okay, I have these ideas about what I'm trying to do, and I'll do it as best I can, and then I also have to live in the world, but I'm all about that prevention and always trying to make the best choices. I do feel it doesn't really make sense. There's no history of breast cancer in my family. I had my first baby before 30. I had 3 children, nursed them all. I'd always been a runner. I was like of my group of friends, I was like the healthy, you know what I mean? Everyone thought of me as the healthiest. So I have to believe that there's toxins, and I just have a sensitivity. Like, some people can be exposed to toxins and nothing happens, but there are toxins, obviously, that, you know, I can try to avoid. So that's what I try to do. It just becomes a way of life. It's not even that complicated anymore. Yes.
Do you find yourself being a voice for some people that are going through what you're going through? Is that why there's this connection?
Absolutely. I mean, every talk I've had, there's been at least half a dozen people who, well, I could say like in San Francisco, and it's not just women, it's interesting. It's really expanded well beyond not only cancer, but into not only breast cancer, but other cancers and other chronic illnesses and beyond that. But I'll go back to when I was in San Francisco, and I didn't know how people who were just facing surgery or something would feel about even hearing, you know, do you want to hear this? Is it a good? I didn't know, because I didn't write it thinking, oh, I'm writing this for cancer patients. I just wrote it, you know, but this man who is like 39, super healthy, blah, 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 got diagnosed with melanoma, and a friend of his had told him to come to my reading, and he was just riveted. I could tell he was staring at me the whole time, and he came up and he just said, I'm having surgery Friday, and this was like the best gift I could have had, because it made me feel less alone. So I think it gives voice to those thoughts and feelings that people are thinking but don't articulate, both because it's almost scary to articulate too much of that to yourself, and you don't really want to, like I said, I didn't want to burden anyone with them, and they don't get talked about, so they're all bottled up, and so then someone says it, and it's like, yeah, that's right, cancer is a bitch, you know? It's like people want to say it and think it, but it's like you're trying to put on, I think women especially try to put on kind of this good face. They don't want to, you know, a big thing I've learned is that people, there is a little cancer, there's a stigma with this, and I think I've realized that what it is you say that word cancer and people give you that face. I don't know if anyone knows, like that, oh, okay, and they kind of back away, and really I realize it's their fear. And I probably did that too before. And I think that that's part of the reason I want to get up and talk about it, because I do think that it's hard when it's like you're wearing a label and people put you in this kind of category of, you know, oh God, I'm glad it's not me. So like people look at you like you are my worst nightmare, and then you become their dread. And that's not a good feeling, in addition to dealing with everything you're dealing with. And as women, I think we're so sensitive that we then try to take care of the other person. So it becomes this weird and complicated thing that's a lot of waste of energy. So I would love to be able to talk about this and say to people, try not to do that. There's this one thing I always tell people not to say. They always ask me, what should I say, what should I not say? Never say, and I know you mean well when you say it, how are you? You're like, I could be having the best day, I just ran, I'm feeling good, everything's going well, I'm not thinking about my next appointment, and someone says that and I'm right back there thinking, I'm not okay. And it's really, again, that feeling of like, that fear, it's their fear, I think, and making you other and different and over there instead of, saying, keeping you kind of in this world. And I know I went well beyond your scope of your question. I was a borderline case for radiation, but they got very wide, clean margins. And I was actually discussed at the tumor board, and I did not do radiation.
What were your hormone receptors?
Well, I don't know. I'm guessing they were positive because they put me on tamoxifen. I mean, isn't that true? Why would I be on? Is that true?
It's just at your age. I was wondering about, that they put you on that.
Yeah, well, they didn't put me on it, which they talked about. When I was 41, I had my first problem. it was, like an atypical kind of thing. And they did discuss that, and they said that was too young, they thought, because then you're not quite. And then I had another problem at 2 years after that, 43, but that was proliferative changes. This is all in the same breath. And then my diagnosis was 2006. So I was 45 by then, and they thought now's the time, because that's 5 years. Why do you think I shouldn't be on tamoxifen? Tell me. I don't love taking it. I don't think there's anything else I could have gone on. I mean, it's either that or nothing. And so I went for that. Yeah. Back to I think you're exactly right. It's important. I mean, about, just being here, that's wonderful. I mean, it's right. It's like it's great that you had that attitude. And
most of the women that I work with and that I went back to work within a couple weeks, and they were just like amazed. They just couldn't believe it. And I just said, well, chances are of having some kind of a cancer in your life are really very positive.
yeah.
It's going to happen to a lot of people. And if you think, oh, why is it me? There are millions of people getting this, not only you.
Yeah. Although I did the why is it me? I did that, and that's another thing I like to say when people say what to say to people is that I think it's okay to go into a state of self-pity, and I think you can wallow in that, because I think you can't come out of that until you go in it. Like, sit in the muck, feel the pity, you know what I mean? Like, go through all the things you have to go through, and you'll come out. But I think a lot of times, again, it's people's fears that want you to get beyond, oh, you're going to be fine. Oh, like they try to talk you out of that bad feeling. But bad things feel bad. And, and I think that's okay. I think it's good to validate that for other people, whether you're dealing with them as a loved one or as a health professional, just to validate the fact that this doesn't feel good. And it kind of messes with your life in a major way. And it doesn't quite go back to normal, don't you think? It's a new set of normal for me. I think that's kind of an issue. I'm going to get your question. I know you had one in a second, but I think that's the thing that I have found when I have been traveling from health professionals is that I think medically and technologically we have so far outpaced, because of all this early diagnosis, what this psychological and emotional impact is of having a diagnosis in your 40s with young kids. And even if it's a fairly good diagnosis, that feeling and that fear never completely goes away. And how do we deal with that? How do we deal with people who live with this kind of chronic fear, I guess is what you'd say, because you're getting checked a lot. I mean, you're reminded every time you go in to have, your MRI or your mammogram that, they're really looking carefully. So there's that reminder. And I don't really know. Have any of you had that as an issue of people? I mean, I think it's become more of an issue. I'm meeting so many people in their 30s and 30s even, and 40s, who have some kind of early diagnosis of a chronic, potentially life-threatening illness. And how do you handle that? See, I just thought, oh my God, I'm so healthy, I'll just live forever. I mean, that's how I always thought, which, was stupid. But you had a question?
Going back to the last chapter that you read,
Yeah.
the thoughts that keep racing through your head, feeling so stretched thin, that you wasn't doing right, and playing with your kids, that I play with them too much, that I play with them not enough, all those questions kind of going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Did what happened to you with your diagnosis, did that change that type of thinking? Or do you still kind of have those thoughts? And if you do or do not, how do you change that?
Yeah. I think that at first I had a lot of those thoughts. Those were kind of repetitive thoughts I kept having and wondering, it's sort of that idea of we all have this life and how do you use the time? And I think, do you have the career first, then the kids? Do you have the kids and the career to get all that? And there's no real one right. I guess that's what I eventually came to, I think that there were moments after when I thought, God, I should have gotten that career under my, thinking I should have done it this way. or no, it was right to, do that, but then, like I kept going back and forth and kind of replaying all the different variations on how I might have lived my life. And at some point I thought, this is just such a waste of energy. And I just started doing the living more urgently, where I just said, you know what, who do I want to be? Who did I mean to be? What was the life I meant to live? What are all those things I forgot to do? How can I be my most amazing self that I want to be right now? And that's what I started to do. And so it was very liberating in that way. But I went through months and months of that ruminating and trying to figure it out. I still don't even, I don't know. And I don't know that I think I've come to the conclusion there is no one right answer. I don't know that there's a right amount of baby doll to play. I don't know. But sometimes, like when I read that, I can feel a little weepy because I still wonder, did I play enough? I don't know. But I think for women especially, it's really hard to figure out that balance, and I don't know. I mean, basically, I launched my career with my two daughters launching to college. I mean, it's kind of an odd thing, not how I planned it. I thought I would do it a lot earlier, but then somehow that feels right. Like I still have my son at home, and it's easier to try. I mean, they're at college. I saw them on the road when I was in New York, and I'm like, okay, maybe this was how it was supposed to be. But whether it was or not, it is what it is. And so I just try to embrace that. It's a lot easier not to beat yourself up, although I have done that a lot. Yes?
Were you able to find a way to help your family to help you with that, or did they ultimately find a way to help you live the life you wanted to live?
They've just had to adapt. I mean, it's like a lot of times my hesitation had to do with the fact that I was thinking, oh no, I'll do that after the kids get a little older, or after my husband's schedule gets a little less hectic, or I could always come up with an excuse of why this wasn't the time to do any number of things. Even like when I wanted to run a half marathon. Well, that was 4 days in New York City. I had sort of talked about doing that kind of thing for a long time, but then it was like, oh, those 4 days, let's see that. Oh, Andrew, my son, has a little league thing. You know how you can just, I could just totally always talk myself out of anything. And then I just was like, no, I'm calling. I made the decision. I call and made the reservations. And I had told my husband, and then after I made the reservation for everything, I called him up. I go, so I'm going to New York City in August, blah, 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 dates. He goes, what's that for? And it's like, I had told him I wanted to do this, but he was so used to me not really following through on doing things. And now it's like, I'm on the road, I'm touring, I'm busy, I'm doing stuff. And it's not so much that, it's like my relationship with my family got renegotiated just because I started behaving differently. And they've been great. I mean, I was surprised. I didn't know how it would turn out, how it would work out. But like my son he always stands at Borders and they're on the front table, and and then I worried that I was prolonging the trauma. This is funny. I was prolonging the trauma of this. Like, not only did I go through this, but then I write a book about it. And then, over the last 3 months, people are interviewing me, calling me. All I'm talking about is breast cancer. I'm like, what kind of mother would, put this, constant trauma on their child? But so I was really worrying about that. But then it was a month ago, and the books came out at Borders. They're on the front table. And I'm standing there with my son, and he's holding a book, and he's looking at me, and he's looking at the book, and looking back and forth. And then he goes, Mom, you really turned this thing around, didn't you? And I thought, I couldn't take it away. Not talking about it doesn't make it go away. And so I was so proud of him. I was just I teared up, and I was like, so they're just adapting to what's happening. And I think I worried about, I have to get them ready for that time when I'm going to launch. I have to get them ready for this. And it's like, no, I'm just doing it. And life goes on, and they're okay. I mean, no major catastrophe has happened as a result, and I feel better, and I think they like it because I feel better too, about myself and just about, living my life more fully. It's time for me. I think it's time for women all the time, but I think it's hard to come to that, especially when you have little kids, to realize that it's okay to do all that. I mean, some of you probably do that.
What would you suggest in people talking to an individual who's first diagnosed with cancer? And then also just, if you come upon a friend that has cancer,
Yeah.
and you're not real close, but you know each other. I mean, what's
Okay.
your words of wisdom?
Well, those are two separate things. So I'll start with the healthcare professionals. I want to just acknowledge the fact that because my husband was in medical school and is a physician, I totally understand how hard it is to deal with what you're dealing with every day. And even as the wife of a physician, I didn't want my husband to you have to set up that boundary. You get too emotionally involved, it just takes everything out of you. So while on the one hand I say that, then I flip over to the patient side, and my husband and I both did, and it was like, wow, if you're too unemotional, it makes you feel like you're this slab of meat. Do you know? And that's kind of how it can feel. And I don't mean that. I understand, so I'm sitting there thinking, I totally get why you can't kind of maybe be there with me emotionally. I get that as a physician, it's not really your job. At the same time, when you're dealing with so many people who are just kind of treating you like this slab of meat going through this process, you start feeling disconnected from yourself, and that's not a good feeling. So I guess, and then there's all the fear, and I think I felt that from a lot of people. I think probably, especially because you're working around a lot of disease and death, and I give you so much credit, it's got to be really hard, and you probably are relieved it's not you. And so I guess I'd say, and this is probably really hard, if you could just be aware of the fact when you're projecting your fear onto the patient, it's probably totally not conscious. And if you could just, because what happens, especially I think with women, as I was saying before, is that you take on. So then I started feeling bad for the person who was looking at me like they didn't want to see me, didn't want to be me. And so then I get out of myself and I'm thinking, oh, I don't want them to feel that. And then I'm trying to say something to cover that and to kind of make them not feel. And I was just reading, there was a study in the UK, I just read this the other day, about how often women, especially who are diagnosed with breast cancer, end up, they don't feel as bad about their diagnosis as all the people around them. There was just this amazing, and I said, yeah, that's exactly right. People burst into tears, so this goes into the front. People look scared, your friends and other people, and you're like, oh, I'm okay, I'm going to be fine. You don't feel fine, but suddenly you're like taking care of them, and that's really not where the patient should be. So I guess if you could just be aware of not looking at them with those like, you are my worst nightmare, you are my dread, because does not a good feeling. And I think the best thing you can do, for one thing, is just to be with them, if you know what I mean. Be with them wherever they are. And I don't think it's one feeling. I think you go through a whole bunch of crazy feelings. Like, I think you go from why me to anger. Then you could go into kind of giddy laugh. I mean, there's like this whole role. It's not like, it's a very complicated feeling, those feelings that are coming and going. And I guess as a friend, or maybe even as a healthcare professional, if you could just be with someone wherever they are and not try to talk them into some other place, and just so that would validate their feelings. But I have to say that a couple of things that were most helpful. Oh, and remember, as a healthcare professional, your patients are really concerned about their body image. I think people forget that because suddenly it's just like, get the cancer out, blah, 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 blah. But you know what, you're still, like, as a woman, you're still a woman, and you're worried, oh God, what if I lose my hair? What am I gonna look like with, a scarred breast or one breast? There's all that stuff, even though you are mostly concerned about that, there's that stuff going on, there's that, there's still that little vain part, I think, in everyone that still wants to feel like they're not, they're still vital and, but anyway, there are two things that were said to me that were very valuable from friends. And one was, before I knew whether I was going to have chemo or not, my friend, who was my triathlete friend, who I always ran with, and after I was diagnosed, I thought, I don't even deserve to be her friend. I'm a fake healthy person, you know what I mean? I just I just thought she's not going to want to even hang out with me. You feel weird things like that, she's going to just think, why would I want to, I don't want to be with her. She did the wrong thing. And so she was at my house, and I was just kind of feeling, she said, and she's the one who said, let's go run this half marathon. I was like, are you kidding? I hadn't even had my surgery. I was in between surgeries. I was like in August. So this is like February. And I'm thinking, I can't even think that far in advance. And I couldn't even really answer her, but I was just standing there, and then she just kind of took my hands, and she said, if you have to shave your head, I'm shaving mine in solidarity. And, you know, I didn't have to, but I just was like, that is standing with someone. That's like not saying, I'm going over here. It's like, I'm going to come stand with you in this mucky place. That was just so loving. And then, after I ran the half marathon, it's in August, and I have my breast, but it has several scars on it, and we were sitting in this kind of lounge, and talking, and I was telling them how, you know, having a scarred breast doesn't make you feel so attractive. You know, like it kind of like made me feel less attractive. And they're like, show me your scar, show me your scar. I have one that's like really far up here. And I was like, you know, I hadn't really shown anyone except my husband. So I like, it's pretty dark, and I lean down and I like kind of inch down and show them the top of this not beautiful scar. And they're both like staring at me, and then they're looking, and I'm like feeling really funny. And they go, you know, scars are hot. You know, and I don't know if they meant it, but like that just meant a lot to me. Does that help? Those are just kind of things. And like, I wish someone had said, there was one thing someone didn't say to me, one more thing, and that is, I wish someone had said to me, I remember feeling this when my daughter had food allergies, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, and I was just trying to figure out, you know, how to get the bottom of this, and the doctors didn't know. And I remember thinking, as her mother, I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to figure, I don't care what I have to do. And so I was thinking about that the other day, and then I thought what I wish would have been great. Someone had said that, and they just would have said to me, no matter what, we're going to figure this out. We'll find a Chinese herbalist. We'll go to Mexico. You know, and even if it's not true, I guess it's again that way of saying, you know what, I'm going to be here with you, and I'm going to go through this craziness, and I'm not going to step away. I'm not going to be afraid of it. And I'm going to help you try to just do everything you can. So just keeping them in the world and in life. And don't just talk to them about their appointments. That's another thing. People think you just want to talk about like your health. No. You want to know, what movie did you see? How are your kids doing? Like, bring the world in, especially when they're going through all those. Because it's just like, for a while, it just seems like all you do is go to appointments. And that's just, you know, it's just kind of that feeling of, well, what else is going on in the world? So. Is that helpful? Okay. Yeah, thanks. Anyone else? Well, thank you. This is great. Thanks.